Nice to have you with us once again, but not some nice statistics that I'm going to throw at you. According to a 2011 survey, an alarming 80% of pensioners have not completely achieved their predetermined retirement goals. In a Old Mutual survey, it paints a similar picture. Only 26% of retirement plan members having adequate funds at retirement. The other 74% experience a shortfall. And an even scarier one from the latest Old Mutual Retirement Monitor, only 54% of the respondents, bear in mind all these people are in full-time employment, only 54 of the people who are 10 years away from retiring have actually started saving for their retirement. Post-retirement planning and post-retirement living. That's what we're looking at on this show. Jason Sharpe is the Chief Executive of Paramount Life. Stephen Nathan is the CEO of 10X Investments. They're our guests in the studio. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Nice to have you guys with us. Those are bleak pictures that are being painted there, Jason.
I think the entire retirement landscape in South Africa is undergoing a change at the moment. That's driven by a lot of different factors, and I think it's important to divide up pre-retirement and post-retirement. In the pre-retirement space, we're looking at various issues such as people cashing in retirement investments. I think it's very interesting to note where you say 10 years pre-retirement, many of those people would have had an element of savings in the past but had cashed that in order to help them with their debt. But the area which we as a company, Paramount Life, focus on is on the post-retirement. People haven't saved enough, people haven't earned as much as they were expecting, and most importantly, people arriving at retirement now are looking into the future and saying, wow, at interest rates and investment returns that are expected going forward, even though I thought my money would be enough, it's not enough. That's why when you look in the retirement space, innovation is key at the moment, and particularly aspects that deal with longevity and how you take account of that.
Now, longevity is actually one of the factors because there's been a lot of research done into how long people are living. And people are expecting, according to some of the research I saw, expecting to live about 10 years after they retire. But some of the stats are showing that if you, as a male, if you live to 65, the chances are you're going to make it to 80. And people aren't expecting to live that long, Stephen.
You're right. There are a lot of reasons, so it's hard to pinpoint exactly what. But in the post-retirement, I think the first point is that if you get to retirement without enough money, you've crashed. And once you've crashed, there's very little you can do. You're caught between a rock and a hard place. But specifically with longevity, it has been increasing. And if you're at 65 as a male, roughly about 20 years you should plan for, and that's an average. So it means obviously if you're above average longevity, you're going to live longer than that. And it's something like if you've got a male and female, so a married couple at age 65, there's an above 50% chance that one of them will live to 90.
And people are not making any sort of, I can't generalize like that, but the vast majority of people are not making or the planning that they're making is not taking that into account.
Jeremy, I've been involved in retirement funds for about 20 years now, and these horrific statistics have not gotten better. So really, I think that as an industry and as a regulator, they should say, why are we failing and what can we do about it? And the reality is that the reasons why we fail are actually very simple. And it's we don't save enough. So you should be saving 15% of your total salary for a working life. So not waiting until 10 years. 15% for 40 years. And as been mentioned, a lot of people aren't doing that because they're cashing in, etc. So that's the first problem. You've got to be a responsible saver, 15% for 40 years. The second reason is that we believe at 10X that costs are just too high. The aggregate cost of retirement investing is close on 3% for most people. And relative to your real return, you're just eroding too much of the return is being lost in fees.
Okay, I knew you were going to bring up costs, and I want to come back to costs in a moment. But you say you've been in this industry for around 20 odd years. Jason, I can see you haven't been in this industry for 20 odd years. But 20 years ago, this industry was very different because you worked for a company, you paid, you had deductions, and that was on a defined benefit system. And then we moved from the defined benefit, which if my understanding is correct, said you would be paid out 20% of your last salary per month, and it kept in pace with inflation and all the rest of it. Now it's moved to a defined contribution, and that's where people seem to be falling behind.
Yeah, so I think the key thing to understand is, which we as a business take a view on retirement is actually a risk decision. There are 4 primary risks in retirement. There's investment risk, inflation risk, longevity risk, and a 4th one called behavior risk. So what's investment risks? Markets go up and down. And as a retiree, you don't want to be drawing money when markets are down, because the magical thing that a lot of people call compound interest works in the reverse in retirement. Longevity, just to add something which we mentioned earlier on, and I think it's very important, we often call the life expectancy to 80 the red or black at a casino bet. Life expectancy means 50% of people will survive longer than that. And your statistic where you say 85, we can tell with certainty now, using our patented model, that a healthy 65-year-old male is expected to live to 87. The big difference now that's available in the market through Paramount Life is, if you're sick or you have a lower lifestyle, we can accurately project your longevity shorter. So as an example, if your longevity is 5 years, you can pass that risk of living beyond the 5 years to Paramount Life. Whereas in a typical investment scenario where you would go in a living annuity, you would be taking all the risk yourself. So the question for a lot of people is how much risk do I want to take? When you mentioned early on the issue of defined benefit versus defined contribution, that's exactly what's happened. Historically, your employer took all the risk in a defined benefit scenario. You sat back, your employer paid you your income for the rest of your life. Now in the defined contribution space, the individual is taking on more risk than ever. And it's crucial that people understand you can transfer that risk to an insurer, and you can do it efficiently. Even though you may not have enough money, there are mechanisms to make your money go further.
Okay, I want to come back to that point, but we're sort of unraveling this ball of string here pretty quickly. Stephen, your whole issue is with costs of these sort of schemes. And that's, if I'm correct and my memory serves me correctly, because you've been on the show before, that is where 10X is very strict, is on their costs, because as Jason was saying, you've got your investment, you've got costs, you've got, what were the others?
Investment, longevity, inflation, and behavioral risk.
All right, thank you. And costs. That's your big bugbear.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, investing, the principles are pretty simple. I mean, you need a bit of education to be able to do it, but effectively you always have a liability. So what is the value of your liability? And you can approximately get a good ballpark figure. So, we work on, as a rough estimate, 10 times your final salary. So everybody today knows if I'm earning 100,000 per year, they can add a zero to that. You need $1 million in today's money when you get to retirement. That's kind of your liability, because you could replace 60% of your final salary. You could go to an insurance company, they would take away the risks. They would pay you a guaranteed income. It would grow with inflation, so you wouldn't have the risks that Jason had alluded to, and will last the rest of your life. Even if you're 110, they'd still be paying you. So that's your liability. So in order to meet that commitment, you need the asset. And the asset is really, it's got 2 components, savings and return on savings. So despite all the complexity and all the markets around us, the more you save, the more you're going to have, and the more your return, which is a risk decision, the more you're going to have. But what no one really in the industry talks about is the aggregate costs.
Okay, before you go into aggregate costs now, let me understand you. What you're saying is that if I'm going to retire tomorrow, I should have 10 times what I'm earning today invested already.
Yeah, that's a minimum at age 65. Obviously, so we assume at age 65, if you have a minimum of 10 times your final salary, you should be able to maintain living standards. And as you say, most of the statistics tell you that 80 to 90% of people are well below that. In fact, half of South Africans are below 30%.
Okay, so 10 times. I'm just trying to work this out now because I'm in media. So 10 times my monthly...
Your total annual package.
My annual package.
Your total annual.
Geez, so I've got to have about 440 Rand available to me then.
It's a lot of money.
And
that's a huge amount of money.
I would actually dispute the 10 times figure. Sorry, Stephen. what's crucial inside retirement, and we've got some statistics, is the 10 times works well if you want to maintain your 100,000 Rand income, when we were talking the example with R1 million. If you want to maintain that 100,000 Rand income going into the future, 10 times is fine. But now comes the next question, which I talked about inflation risk later on, is you want your salary or your pensionable income to increase as your costs increase. Now, many people have said, and it all depends, and I will say to you again, on your income, occupation, lifestyle, and medical situation when buying an annuity from somebody like Paramount Life. It all depends on those scenarios, but roughly R1 million would get you about 4,000 to 5,000 Rand increasing with inflation per month. Now, that is the scary statistic for a lot of people, is to say, I've got R1 million, and you think about how many people have saved up R1 million. Now, that should give me 4,000 Rand. Now, the big problem, as we see it in retirement, is a lot of people are saying, wow, I've got R1 million, it's 10 times my salary. It's no problem to take 200,000 Rand out of that. Or why can't I start drawing 10,000 Rand out of that? Retirement isn't a 5-year decision. As we talked earlier, it's a 20 to 30-year decision. Now, if you're making the wrong decisions in the first couple of years of your retirement, you're potentially looking at a problem in years 10, 15, 20, and 25. And that's what's happening now. You look at what National Treasury is trying to do at the moment. The focus is becoming, because of what's happened in the living annuity space, to the 75 and 80-year-olds. They're all sitting, drawing too much money, and it becomes a very slippery slope downwards as soon as you start drawing too much money. So there are ways, as I said early on, to say, hold on, the 4,000 Rand applies per million applies to the healthiest person. But if you're not as healthy, if you've maybe worked in a manual occupation, if you're earning a lower income, if you've had a cancer as an example, a heart attack, high blood pressure, those types of things, the income increases per R1 million. Why? You expect it to live a short amount of time, so your money only needs to cover that amount of retirement. So it works by individual, it can be different.
Yeah, okay. Geez, today. I don't know how you oaks do this business, to be honest.
No, but the point is, don't complicate things. That's the issue, is it's easy to get led astray from the core principles. The core principles, if you can get 10 times your final salary at age 65, you can take because it's all proportional to what your salary is, you can go to a life company and they will give you an income that will replace 60% of your final paycheck. So if you earn 10,000, you'll get 6,000 per month. That amount will last for however long you live. The reason why you don't need to replace 100% is that in retirement, your expenses are less. You don't have to contribute to retirement. So you take already 100, you take your 15% deduction, that's 85%. Your debt should be lower. Your kids should have left the house. Your tax rate is lower. So if you can get that as a minimum, you're going to be okay. And what the surveys and the facts are telling us is that people are destitute. So let's go from destitute to okay, and then we'll worry about, like increasing lifestyles.
Okay, we're going to come back to this in just a moment, because I want to get on to what situation you should be in, because we're slowly starting to get towards there's got to be a line there. What situation you should be in when you decide to retire. We'll be back in just a moment.